You could have the greatest business in the world, but if you get hit by the proverbial beer truck, what's going to happen? Is your business? And I'm serious, and this has happened.
Truck. I've never heard this before.
You've never heard that one. Well, that's in the exit. That's the one we use in the exit planning community. Yeah, but I mean, what happens if something happens to you? You know, you either die or you become disabled and can no longer function in the business.
Right.
How's your business going to function? And how's your family? How are you going to maintain your family's lifestyle? So putting in business continuity instructions has to be the starting point.
Tyler, you had a great session called, I love this. Do you have leaky profit? Like, ew, leaky profit, what? But no, find out where your profit leaks from your collision center and how to fill the holes. Yes, yes, and yes. I want to fill any holes of leaky profit 100%. So share with us kind of a little bit about what you talked about in your session.
Yeah, happy to do that. So like you said, there's so much going on in the body shop, right? It's such a complicated business, so many moving parts, so many moving pieces, and you got to stay on top of all of them, right? Or else profit can quite literally leak out of the business. So this presentation was really, really fun to research and to put together, because what we really centered on is we touched a lot of different areas where, you know, that profit might be leaking out of your business. Things maybe you have never even thought about before, maybe other things that you have thought about but didn't really know how to solve them. We talked about some proactive steps you could take. So it was really meant to be, you know, whether you were a shop owner, a shop manager, a front office person, CSR estimator, or even a technician and in the back of the house doing the production stuff. It was meant to give everyone in those groups something to think about of how they could get better at being a more profitable shop, right? My goal is to help shops be profitable so they can exist long into the future and build their business and take care of their people and take care of themselves. So,
absolutely. So do you find when you're kind of evaluating this kind of thing that there's one main leaky spot in the hose, if you will, that everybody seems to share in, or is it really different for every shop?
I would say there's a few areas where it's challenging, and a lot of shops similarly have those problems, but it can be quite varied, right? Depending on who you are, what your background is, what kind of shop you came into, how it's been run, different things like that. It can be quite varied across the spectrum. But some of those areas where we look at and we see a lot of profit leaks, maybe not leaks, it's a bit of the nature of the business, right? Where you have third-party payers who pay the bills, but getting at some of that OE information to understand really the blueprint for how you fix the car. That's one of the big areas. My group has been a lot focused on repair logic and building access to those information. So, with repair logic, we find a lot of people either are doing work that they're not getting paid for because they didn't document it. That's one challenge, right? That's a big profit leak. If you're doing work and your techs are not getting paid for it, your estimator's not getting paid for it, you as the business owner are not getting paid for it, right? The other thing is that there's kind of this false sense of security in the estimating systems where you say, hey, we're going to R&I something. And it comes with a few things that they suggest that you should also R&I, right? So you immediately go and add those things and you think that's it, right? Well, we've done a lot of research on this and that's not it. There's a lot more that's generally missed. And those are R&I operations that if you're not doing, the manufacturer is specifying that you should be doing them, right? And if you're not doing those, you're not doing repair right. And if you're not doing them, you're obviously not getting paid for them as well. So it's really a critical piece to make sure, we're getting paid for the work we need to do and that we know what the work is that we're supposed to do. I think a lot of people think that the body shop is the expert on how to fix the vehicle, and they're really not, right? The manufacturer who built the vehicle is the expert on how it needs to get engineered back safely and how it needs to get repaired so that all that engineering stays intact. And so really, that was one of our major focus areas, but I think that's one that's widely applicable to a lot of shops.
I love how you said that we are the perceived experts because we're the one that does the work, but the manufacturer is truly the expert on how that's supposed to be done. Yeah. And I work with a lot of shops that use Repair Logic, and it's really changed so much of the way that they do their business in regards to, well, like you said, there's things that need to be done that they weren't finding before and they weren't doing them. So come to find out, you're doing an improper repair. And then, like you said, also, then you're not getting paid for something that you could have been paid for, that you should have done. And if you're doing it, you should be paid for it. And then also, I think at this time, in the industry, we need to use information as a resource because for so many years we didn't have it. And so now we actually have a place where we can go to find all this information. Like, we had P pages and all that kind of stuff, but now there's technology that helps give us quick access to these things. It's not a book that you got to leaf through. We have technology to assist with this. Do you feel like there's pushback from shops in using the technology?
That's a fantastic question. I think anytime you get change, people are kind of resistant to that, right? We create these ruts and we like to stay in our ruts for everything. Right. But yeah, absolutely. This procedure data, it's been around forever, right? The manufacturers have been publishing it for a long time, but it's just not in a method where you could get at it in a timely manner.
Right.
Repair Logic has tried to break down a lot of those walls and make it really intuitive, really easy, and really quick to get at. And by doing that, it's enabled a lot more people. And it's also enabling, people with low skill or no skill to start to become very skilled very quickly. And it's critical that we use that information, right? There's millions and millions of procedures for these manufacturers, right? We did some research a couple months ago and just found of, a handful of manufacturers, there were over 2 million procedures available. So
wow,
just finding what you need is like kind of finding a needle in a haystack, right?
Yeah.
And then being able to collaborate and pull those things together and share it with the people that are needed. That technology exists today. And it had never been applied to, the body shop manuals until Repair Logic came along and brought that technology into the repair manual space. So
let's get into something really practical that the people on the call, either watching or listening, can do in their shop. And I thought it would be kind of neat to get into this. You had posted about technicians and figuring out what their cost per hour is. And I thought it was something that it's not extremely complicated for somebody that doesn't know their numbers. This is an equation that will be easy. If you're watching on YouTube, I'll put a screenshot of what Greg had showed up so you can see it using my magic. But Greg, go ahead and explain how that works.
So I was actually helping a shop owner, and he was pretty heavy on his technician cost.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went ahead and put all of his hours together that I think we did like last 4 months, and put all the hours together. And then, his build hours on estimate hours,
okay,
what I'm talking about, whether that be in CCC or whatever management system, last 4 months and how many working days, because, every month's got a different amount of working days. January had 21, February had 20, March has 23. I mean, that's kind of a roller coaster, right? But it comes down to working days. And, of course, December, I think, had 21, as I recall. But anyhow, we end up, I think it was back to, we included, we would have included November, December, January, February is what we included. And but you took the amount of working days that they had, divided that the amount of hours that they produced in those 4 months and those working days, and then took the actual technician cost. Now you can start splitting hairs when you start loaded, unloaded, whether that includes health insurance or a vacation, payroll taxes that the business has to pay, a lot of things, IRAs, different things like that. But as a rule, if you can be unloaded, you want to be in maybe the 16, maybe as high as 18% of sales would be your technician cost. Just kind of keep that in mind. But another way to look at it with our global bonus deal, all of my guys are clock hour, the technicians on the floor. And if the gentleman that I was working with, like I say, he was heavy on his technician cost because he had a hybrid. He had clock hour people and he had flat rate people. Long story short, he was paying about $26 an hour in a $46 an hour market. Wow. $26 an hour in a $46 an hour market. That's worse than it was 50% commission it was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So I'm all for support. I totally support as far as paying your technicians and make sure those people are taken care of and very well. But from a profitability side, it was about 6% of net profit was paying overboard on the technician. So, if you could stay at a 65% GP, labor GP, so if you bill $100 worth of labor, you would want to pay out unloaded about $35. So let's say if it was $50 an hour, at $50 an hour, we'd be at $17.50 an hour is what we would be paying. Well, most of the country is above $50 an hour. But anyhow, but you take your technician costs that you had for that 4 months, you divide that by your billed hours that you produced by that 4 months, and that'll give you the cost per hour. And if you're totally flat rate in your shop, then that number should be pretty close. But if you have a hybrid or you have just clock hour people, that's going to tell you the story where you're at. So
yeah. Well, and now how did he know that he was heavy? That he was paying his techs too heavily? This is back to having our P&L set up correctly. It is crucial. There's so many. I would say it's more than 50% of the shops, in my opinion. I know we've got more MSOs and all that, but let's take the independent shops. Without question, the independent shops, in my opinion, that what I have seen, their P&Ls are, you can't read the things. Yeah,
they're not set up at all. You'll have gross sales. That's it. That's all that's in there. What percentage of your sales was paint and materials? What percentage of your sales was labor? What percentage of sales was parts?
Yeah.
They don't even know if they're, some of these guys don't even know if they're making money on paint materials. Hey, I spent 10% of sales or 12% of gross sales on paint, but I don't, I have no idea what I spent. Well, look, then you'd have to add up all your jobber bills and then total that up and then divide that into your gross sales. And well, shoot, they may be at 9% cost on paint materials. We want to strive to be at a 50% GP on paint materials, and it's very achievable if with good estimating. And I know the rates and all that kind of stuff, but you can invoice. Paint invoicing to me is you got to be careful. Not saying you shouldn't paint invoice, but what I'm saying is that don't let bad estimating. Paint material invoicing be a Band-Aid for bad estimating is what I'm trying to say. And there's a lot to that. But anyhow, back to technician costs. You got your administrative costs and so forth, but the technician costs, you got to keep a handle on that, or it can get out of hand, and it's really hard to take money back. Yeah.
So now here we are, a year out. What is going on with Steve over there?
It's been crazy. It's been a very trying time, obviously. It's crazy to think that 3 years ago when COVID kind of started around this time, that we thought, we're only going to have these parts delays or these issues for a couple months. And yet every shop across the country is now facing the same challenges they've been facing now for 3 years. So we keep saying, I hope we get back to the old normal. Unfortunately, this is probably the old normal right now, right? Where this is going to be what we're dealing with parts delays, with insurance company delays, things like that we're going to deal with now for a couple more years and just kind of plan on that. So we've just spent a ton of time in 2022 trying to continue to be smarter. When COVID first hit, focusing on each job that's here and maximizing each RO. So 2022 ended up beating 2021 for us here at Louisville Collision by 65% net profit, which is insane.
Wow.
So it was a record year in 2022 as well, to beat our previous record year. And it was great. And we were able to add some people to the team, which certainly helped those things. But it's just been an unbelievable year. Kind of crazy, kind of busy. And certainly time for us to reflect and think about, okay, how can we take some of the chaos out of this right now and get better for 2023? And that's our main focus right now too.
So over there, you guys, what were you doing a month when you had like your record-breaking month in 2021? I mean, record-breaking.
Sure. So we were $800,000 to $900,000 a month consistently.
Okay.
And good profit margins where we wanted to be.
Right.
But we just felt like we needed to add. So we added 5 technicians in 2022. And just seeing how that added to production. Obviously, you have to be able to produce those numbers in all areas, not just in body.
right.
paint at the front door. Every aspect of the pipeline has to be able to handle the additional growth. And so we had to staff back up. And so we're back to the staff of what we had prior to. Okay. And we had 9 months over 1.1 million in 2022. So we instantly saw a 20 or 30% growth in monthly sales just by adding those guys and being a little bit smarter with our processes and just maximizing each RO. So it's been crazy.
So you already had the work coming in. So you probably then were completely backlogged. How many months scheduled out? I assume you schedule your people, your guests when they come in.
Yep. So we've stayed about 6 weeks backlogged for about the last year and a half.
Wow.
A lot of the areas, we do have a kind of a luxury here that we have a ton of room for taking cars, because that's the problem. You know, 30, 40% of the cars that you take in, you may not be able to complete for a month or two based on parts or based on supplement approval or whatever else. Right. So you almost have to bring in more than what you can handle. And if you don't have space, you're not able to do that. You can really limit yourself as a shop. But we've been fortunate to do that. That way, if each technician has 10 cars and can only work on 5 of them, at least he can work on 5 while he's waiting for that part to come in, while he's waiting for that approval to come back.
Yeah. And that is a big issue for most shops, is space. And it always has been, now it's worse because, like you said, we've got vehicles that are stuck waiting, whether it be parts, insurance, whatnot. So you were scheduled out, which allowed you to know, because I think of the sales flow, if we want to call it that, if you don't want to hire more people if you don't have the vehicles coming in. So for shops that are out, that are dying on the vine and don't have enough work, obviously hiring 5 new techs is probably not the best direction. For you guys being so booked out, that makes sense. But I just did a call last night with the Collision Cocktail Hour, and we were talking about profit, break even point, things like that. And as you know, bringing on 5 new people, now you've got to increase the amount of sales you're doing to pay for those people and to allow that to be profitable. So you made a point there about making sure you're getting every penny from every RO. And I think that's a big game changer for shops. How have you dialed that in more?
I think that's the big thing, is just making sure our staff, the way we're handled here, is that we have blueprint estimators that go through each disassembled car with the technician and write not only the supplement items that are needed, but go through the repair procedures, go through the non-included operations, all the thing that Mike Anderson and DEG and all those sources help you with is how to maximize that RO. We don't have to find out how to fix 50 more cars. We just have to find that $200 to $300 per car, right? That we're missing or that we're not asking for, right? No one's going to give you something if you don't ask for it. So that's the big thing, is doing it that way. One of the other major challenges we faced in the last 2 years has been, you can have cash flow issues if you're ordering parts 6 weeks in advance.
Right.
So we kind of instituted a policy here where we will not order parts without an original insurance check or a parts deposit from the customer, because most dealerships now will not take parts back. What if you wreck your car in the meantime while you're waiting to come into me and it totals and I'm stuck with $4,000 worth of parts? So in those scenarios, it's kind of covered us. It took us getting burned a couple of times till we realized, because we had never been scheduled out 6 weeks before. I was used to seeing you on a Tuesday and scheduling you a week and a half later and having you drop your Lexus off, right?
Right.
But that's not the case anymore. So that's kind of the big thing, is how does that work? How does that change? And how do we kind of handle that? And it's been something we've learned. And I'm glad we did. And now we can move forward and be smarter in 2023.
So there's 2 tests.
Okay.
The first test is very simple. It's called a revenue reduction test.
Okay.
And so you use your 2019 revenue as a baseline, and you compare 2020 and 21 to 2019 as the baseline. And if your revenue declined by 50% in 2020, and 20% in 2021 compared to 2019, then you automatically qualify.
Interesting.
And honestly, I don't get involved with the revenue test because it's so simple. I'm not needed to do basic math.
Right.
many collision shops, though, don't qualify under the revenue reduction or don't qualify for many quarters for a multitude of reasons, but mainly demand was strong and there was inflationary pressures that don't trigger those thresholds. So the other way to qualify, which is where I come in, is demonstrating that you made modifications to your business, including supply chain impacts as a result of government orders. So anybody that works anywhere close to automotive know that supply chain has been extremely disruptive over the past couple years.
Yes. Interesting. Okay. So share with me a little bit more about what that looks like. So if first on the revenue reduction component of it, if their revenue has reduced by those percentages you were talking about, I think it was like 50 and 20% or something like that, then what do they do? You were saying you're not involved in that. So they wouldn't contact you for that. How would they then seek assistance if that's the case?
Right. So you claim the credit by amending your 941 payroll forms. And so whoever has helped you prepare those forms, whether they're self-prepared or you have a local independent CPA,
accountant,
I would just reach out to them. It's very simple, very, very straightforward.
Okay.
For the test that I do, it's really for your audit file. So when you amend your 941s and you claim the credit, the IRS is going to cut you a check in roughly 6 to 12 months is what we're hearing it takes to process these. But they're not auditing these or saying, yes, you qualify or no, you don't. It's like when you file your tax return, you file it and then they give you a refund. And then it could be years later that they're saying, hey, we want to look into this more.
Right.
And so with the test that I do, the partial shutdown and the modifications test, there are some subjective aspects to it. And so my analysis is to show the IRS, if they come knocking at some point, that you filed in good faith and absolve you, or at least limit you for any interest and penalties in bad faith filing.
Right. So now can a shop claim both of these or just one?
So it's just one credit.
Okay.
So that 26,000.
There's just two ways to go about getting it.
Yeah, but
Gotcha.
since you say that, one of the popular misconceptions when the CARES Act was originally, put into law, you could claim only PPP or ERC. You couldn't claim both.
Okay.
Some of the modifications since then, you can now claim both PPP and DRC. You just can't double dip on wages. So for most of our clients, PPP covers the 2020 period, and then they would claim ERC in 2021.
Okay.
But of that 26,000, 21,000 is for the 2021 period, and only 5,000 is for 2020. So so substantially most of the credit is still in play.
Okay. All right. And then they could potentially talk with you to find out if they had questions like, where am I at with this? Am I eligible?
Yeah. And so specifically what we're seeing with collision centers, going back to supply chain again, is increase in cycle time. So the time needed to complete repair orders. And so that's walk back to you were waiting for parts.
Right.
They weren't available. And also employees, any business owner knows, and I still wonder myself, where have all of the employees gone?
Yeah, right.
Because it seems like everyone is hurting. So you didn't have parts, you didn't have people, and what maybe took a week to complete a repair is now taking 10 or 11 days. So we're seeing anywhere between 20% to 100% increases in the time it takes to complete a repair order.
Right.
And the threshold that the IRS is looking for is 10%, what they call a nominal impact on the business, which they then define as 10%. So
we can do that all day.
Yeah, it's relatively low, but it does need to be supported with business documentation. And so that's where we take, okay, well, everyone knows supply chain was an issue. Everyone knows labor was an issue. It's almost obvious, but how does that relate to the business? Mm-hmm. And so we look to quantify that as well. It took us longer to repair cars. Mm-hmm. And more often than not, well over the minimum thresholds as defined by the IRS.
One of the things I wanted to chat about, just to be a help to anybody that's going to listen that may not be able to get there, or maybe you're going to hear this and be like, I need to go learn more about this and sit in a session with them. And you certainly should and can, is building the business's value. There's a lot of different points. You guys can see the synopsis on it online. There's a lot of different things they're going to talk about, but people come to me as a marketer, they want to grow their business and they kind of have an idea of building the business value. Like, we understand we've got to grow our sales to build value. And then past that, they don't quite know what else that looks like. Would you guys mind talking about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think, the way I look at it, and I call it owner-based planning, there's really three areas of that. The first one, and it's the one I always start with clients, is what's called business continuity planning, because you could have the greatest business in the world, but if you get hit by the proverbial beer truck, what's going to happen is your business, and I'm serious, and this has happened.
Truck. I've never heard this before.
You've never heard that one. Well, that's in the exit. That's the one we use in the exit planning community. Yeah, but I mean, what happens if something happens to you? You either die or you become disabled and can no longer function in the business. Right. How's your business going to function, and how's your family? How are you going to maintain your family's lifestyle? So, putting in business continuity instructions has to be the starting point. And what's interesting is a lot of times as you're building business continuity, your transition plan will naturally flow from that. Okay. I think the second area, and this is one that I know Laura is going to address, is about what we just talked about, building value. And it's not just so much about looking at increasing revenue, but some of the other areas where you build value in. And then the third one is minimizing risks, because nowadays there's a lot of risks that didn't really exist. I mean, think about it. There's more women coming into the industry, and sexual harassment can become a big thing that's out there. Cybersecurity. There's a lot of new things that are out there, and you have to minimize those risks too.
Good point.
And I'll tag on to that. Talking about risk. To me, and this is where Matt and I complement each other, Matt's thinking about those type of risks. I'm thinking like repairability risk.
Right.
And those exist. You just did a podcast about, ADOS, and, that is a big risk. If you are doing them in-house, it's a risk. If you don't have all your processes and ducks in a row, if you're subletting them to somebody, vetting them, making sure that they have all their ducks in a row, because to me, that is a huge risk at this point in time. I had a windshield put in my little Mercedes, I don't know, probably a year and a half ago, and they calibrated the whatever had to be calibrated on it. And ever since I got the car back, it sees mailboxes and people on the road that don't exist. I mean, I need to take it back and get it recalibrated. But that's a perfect example of that's a pretty big risk for the people that put the glass in it. So I think those kind of issues continue, and then we're going to touch on sales and the different vehicles that will add value to the shop, because different markets predicate different things to increase sales. And I think like the folks that I think most of them will be attending the trade show and seminars that are going to be at Tennessee are going to all fall into kind of one, what we'll call bucket of people that will have like a similar type of growth and value on what the vehicle looks like to do that. So we'll be covering that pretty thoroughly as well.
Not the actual vehicle, but like the way that they would, way they're going to go about it. Yeah. First I was like, what kind of vehicle would you recommend? Oh, wait, no, that's not what she's saying. Gotcha.
We're going to bring a Corvette convertible. And that's the vehicle. No, just kidding.
There you go.
We want to race. Let's do it. Okay. Very cool. So then it's really interesting because Laura doing what she does, and this is something I think it's important for people to pay attention to, even if you think you're going to stay in business forever, Laura deals with people selling their businesses on a regular basis. That's what she does day in and day out as people are buying and selling businesses. And even if, like to Matt's point, you don't have forever, and even if you are going to be passing this down to, even if it's not family, it doesn't always have to be family. Matt, you and I did a podcast and I learned so much about what you do. Oftentimes the family doesn't want to do it. So you're passing it on to maybe a manager or somebody else. You still have to be focused on building the value of the business. And right. I feel like I live this all the time. I'm so busy working in my business that I don't get a chance to work on my business. And it seems like this talk really speaks to that.
Oh, yeah, tremendously. Yes, exactly. Because I learned that, and it's funny. And I thank you, Laura, for giving me credit, but I can't take the credit. It was my coach that taught me that about the 3 types of time. You have tactical time when you're working in your business. You have strategic time when you're working on your business, and you have a renewal time where you're out of your business. But it's actually interesting. The more you grow, and the more, the more value and the bigger your business becomes, it's actually really, you need to take more renewal time. You need to take more time away from the shop, because that's where the creative breakthroughs happen. When we get out of our environment, all right, our conscious mind begins to relax. But the amazing thing, and Napoleon Hill talks about this in Think and Grow Rich, that our subconscious mind then starts working on all of these things. And it's amazing. I mean, have you ever been on vacation and all of a sudden it's like you wake up at night or you're on the beach and all of a sudden this idea just popped. It's like, wow, why didn't I ever think of that? That's why.
Right.
So the bigger you become, the more a renewal time you need to take.